Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm sorry I'm chuckling so much, but Charles, it looks like you have the Spirit of the Lord hovering above your head there.
He is Kuzat Haderach.
It looked especially like that as the intro was playing, and there were just little thumbnails of you guys at the bottom, and it looked like this twirling spirit floating above his head, and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I could be the chosen one. You don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome. I'm Bill.
Linda.
I'm Charles.
I'm Seth.
I'm Chris.
And today we thought we would give our review of Dune 2, since all of us now have seen it, some more than once, I think, right, Seth?
No, I've only seen it the once. I keep trying to see it with my dad, but we keep getting sick.
I almost joined you yesterday, Seth, for my second viewing of it. So
nice.
Unfortunately, I saw it too late, so I wasn't able to pivot to get there. But I did almost call you to say, where are you going to be at? Because I was going to join you. So, but you watched it at the Alamo, right?
Yep.
How was that?
It was great. Like, I was gonna watch it at the Exarban cinema, but decided, you know what? I don't feel like ads before my movie, so I switched to Alamo, and it was actually rad there. I forgot how much I loved it. I had some of the best chicken fingers I've ever had.
All right. Well, I think it's safe to say everybody enjoyed it, right?
Definitely enjoyed it.
There's definitely some things to talk about. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Gina and I have been talking a lot about it, and she's mixed on it, and we'll get into
Really?
it. Yeah,
I'm a little more mixed too, but I've always been mixed with Dune. I've always been mixed with Dune, so
yeah, we'll get into the whys of that, I think.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, Seth, since you're probably seen it the most recent of any of us, you want to give us a little summary?
No, I mean, it's Dune, so I don't think that I need to say spoiler warning. This has been a story that's been out since I've been alive, so
there are some spoilers. I will say this, though, spoiler alert. What Dune Part 2 is not maybe exactly what you're expecting, and some key things have been changed.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of the timeline, the time jump that occurs in the previous film and in the books is basically non-existent here, and not introduced to all of the characters maybe that you would have thought of how you would have been, namely Paul's sister,
also Chani,
and a couple other things.
Like I guess so. Spoiler warning. Anyway, whereas in the first film, because I just rewatched that before seeing this, I thought they did a actually very remarkable job of staying true to the book. In this second part, it feels like they decided to go majorly off script. Maybe not majorly, but
I would say majorly. And
no, majorly. I would say majorly. It's gonna.
Yeah.
I have no idea how they're going to do Dune Messiah now.
So, and I think that was the intent. So the one thing to take note of is the director who was doing this film always kind of wanted to get into what Dune Messiah was. And one of the misconceptions that occurred with the first book of Dune was a lot of people viewed Paul Atreides as this heroic figure, right? This Messiah that came and saved the Fremen and helped them regain control of the planet. But as you go beyond that first book, when we get into Dune Messiah and the Children of Dune beyond that, it becomes much darker, much more complex. And maybe, Charles, this is where you struggled with it. And it's supposed to take a darker turn. Paul starts a holy war. Let's be real here. Billions of people die as a result of Paul's actions. And, you know, the first film doesn't get into any of that. What are the ramifications of what happens when Paul gets into power? So the whole thing behind Dune Part 1 and 2, where 2 starts to throw people, is it feels a little bit like a rug pull, because they're turning the dial from Paul as this heroic figure to we're entering a very dark time as Paul comes into his power. He drinks the water of life and becomes this completely different person almost, that's taking over this planet. He's taking over the Fremen. He's embracing being this religious figure, this Codex Haderach. And people may not all agree with what he is doing. And Chani, his love interest in this film, it takes the brunt of it, frankly. And that's not something you get the feeling of in these other, in the prior film or anything like that. They did leave some things out, which made it hard for people to kind of grasp. But the director here is trying to get us into Dune Messiah, where it's not all roses. It's a holy war.
Well,
Paul is taking these people off planet to start intergalactic battles.
Yeah, well, like Dune Messiah is, so from reading the books, like the Holy War and the billions of people dying in the Holy War, that's just kind of an aside almost.
It is,
in the books, because it's not the important part. And I know that sounds weird, but okay, so like, let's just do the summary really quick. Just
a long time
get it out of the
ago,
way,
right?
get people caught up. So
But you're following royalty in the books mostly, right? I mean, that's what's happening. You're following
it's a little different, and it's all based on my take of having read the book so many times.
Yeah,
and we'll get to it. But so real quick, the summary. It's really kind of the same story that if you've ever seen or read Dune before, as Paul becomes more and more integrated with they land with the Fremen. In the last movie, they were the Harkonnen had just attacked and wiped out all the Atreides forces, and Paul and Jessica had escaped thanks to Dr. Yui, who is also the traitor. But they kind of integrated theirself with the Fremen, and Paul decides that he is actually just Paul decides that he doesn't want to deal with any of this Mahdi nonsense. He and Jessica kind of go their separate ways, with Jessica having drank the water of life, and like really much earlier on than she did previously. But this awakens Aaliyah, who instantly starts affecting the plot by talking to Paul and talking to Jessica and basically encouraging them to lean into the religious aspect. And Jessica also agrees. So her character takes an immediate dark turn as she starts converting the Fremen to follow Paul. And I mean, this wasn't a big part of the story in the book or anywhere else. So it like in the books and in the stories, it just like things happen. We'll ignore and just focus on this movie for now. But Paul goes along, or Jessica goes south, because she wants to influence the religious fanatics down there and prepare them for Paul. Paul stays north to fight the Harkonnen, and they're just absolutely handing it to Raban. Because Paul is basically telling them all about the Harkonnen tactics, which That's another thing I didn't like. There's a lot of little things that about the movie that got me, but so that's going on, and we are finally introduced to the Emperor and Princess Irulan, played by the Emperor is
Walken.
Christopher Walken.
Yeah,
and,
I love it.
And now that I know that the Emperor was Christopher Walken, I feel like he was incredibly underserved. Like, if you've got Christopher Walken as the Emperor, you give him more airtime, right?
I think that's the thing, though, right? For a film that's already that long, you have to balance that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they focused on Paul, Jessica. They didn't really cover the Emperor too much, but they did go more into the Emperor's daughter and her ties with the Bene Gesserits. They did more in the Bene Gesserits. They covered more of the Harkonnens. They gave Fade like an entire arc in here. So I felt like they had to pick and choose their battles, which is why we had some sacrifices in the film for some actors that maybe didn't get enough screen time. Like, Christopher Walken would have been awesome to see more of.
And also, like, this is another one of my complaints, is that they really made him old and feeble and kind of weak.
And maybe that was intentional for an outgoing emperor that was about to lose his reign.
Not from any of the other books, but
that's from the book's perspective, right? So let's cover that on the film, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have a bigger point about this later.
I don't think,
but yeah, I didn't like how they weakened his character. Princess Irulan was still pretty cool. I think that they should have introduced these characters in the first part, though.
I agree. I had a problem with it's Christopher Walken's, and I never forgot it was Christopher Walken's.
Yeah.
And that's not Christopher Walken's fault. It's just that's I was waiting for the Rolex scene, right? And
we're getting into more of the imperial the politics part of this as we shift focus off of Atreides a whole lot more and onto the Harkonnen, and we're introduced to Fade Ruatha, the inheritor to the Harkonnen throne, and as we find out, another candidate for the Kwisatz Haderach. And the Bene Gesserit are kind of like, yes, we can. We can control this one. And so we've got these kind of scenes of the politics moving behind the scenes, and then we're back at. We kind of arrive at a point where Raban has kind of screwed up so much with dealing with Paul that the Baron Harkonnen decides that it's Fade's turn, sends Fade to Arrakis, and he instantly is able to kind of shut Paul and all the Fremen down and drive them into the south, which Paul had been avoiding because he's known through his visions, if he goes south, that he will trigger the Holy War. Yep. Like it's like for some reason he knows that if he goes south, there's no going back from that. But
part of in this film, what Paul struggles with on that is he gets partial visions. He can't fully see the outcomes or whatnot in the futures that he's seeing. And part of Jessica's role trying to convince him is, hey, if you drink the water of life, you'll see. And when he eventually does decide to do that, there's a scene where he comments about, he sees multiple different paths towards the future. And there's one where they kind of make it out of all the nonsense in the Holy War. I wish they spent a little bit more time on that, showing maybe some more scenes of what he was seeing, because he visually kind of said was like, yeah, we've got all these different paths and there's a narrow way through. And I think what throws me is in the first film and this part 2 film, we get glimpses of some of his visions, and some of them are scenes that we've seen and some of them are not yet. There's a scene that shows Paul, to guess based off the future books, conquering a planet, and it's not on Dune. It's a water rich planet with oceanic backgrounds, and Paul's on a ship, with Chani and others standing behind him, looking down at his warriors, raising their weapons to him in triumph. And it's like, oh, damn, when does that happen, or where is that, and what kind of battle was that? Paul has all these types of visions, so we have to, we don't know where they're going to happen or if they're going to happen and which paths Paul is choosing going forward. But to Seth's point, he gets driven south and ends up committing to that and taking the water of life, and that's really where the film
that's where the twist is.
New direction. That's where the twist happens.
Because up until that point, Paul was very he was very oh god, what is it? He was very sincere.
Very nice.
And he had compassion and other things.
Yeah, he was very sincere, very compassionate. He was being honest when he said that he wanted to be a Fremen and not lead them. He takes the water of life, and that was just a flip.
It was the end of that. Yep.
And I really didn't like that.
So I enjoyed it. I liked it, and here is why: is because Paul knew that was maybe a possibility. But at the same time, when he drinks the water of life and he sees everything that he needs to see, he kind of embraced and knew there was only one way to deal with and get through what they needed to. And he had to mature very quickly and just do what needed to be done, regardless
he
of whether
didn't mature, though. He became cold and cruel really fast.
Yeah, I guess mature. Yeah, cold and I don't know if cruel is the right word.
No, he got really cruel. He got cruel. He was you could hear it when he said, when he was first talking to his mother about it, and when he finds it, he's like, "Okay, we'll be Harkonnen." Yep.
And again, I think it's embracing the reality of what he knew they had to face, and he couldn't sugarcoat it. That was the thing. But he had to go in and he had to dominate, and you see him. What I enjoyed about that switch is he didn't sugarcoat it. He marched right into the council of all the Fremen and basically took over.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't.
He did, but I'm more focused on so the original story, and why I think it's focused on Paul and his family, because it's much more about them. And what they changed and how I don't like it is the way that he begins to treat Chani.
Yeah.
And I think that's the rug pull people can't seem to.
It was kind of fun. Well, it's just he made the same decision every guy would make, right? No.
Well, and I, one thing I couldn't see is why. In my mind, I was like, why couldn't he have at least warned her that he was going to have to marry the princess?
So this is what they left out. In the book, he gives this speech to the emperor and to the daughter, and is basically like, you're nothing. This is only for political ties and to shore this stuff up. And, you'll get no love from me. It's going to be a cold, dark relationship kind of thing.
Yeah, and you won't get my children. Chani is my wife in all but name. Yeah, and it's a big moment in the book.
And they let that out, and I think that kind of that screws things up a little bit.
Yeah,
because the audience is looking for, especially if they've known the first book and they've seen the first film, they're looking to have something to hold on to of what's left for what is left of Paul, right? Because at this point in time, Paul is a completely different person. To Seth's point, he's become cold. And if they were going to give the audience, in my opinion, any kind of glimpse of hope, they would have maintained that last speech there to mend whatever was left. That Paul had some of his original soul left, so to speak. They should have put that speech in there where Paul sets the tone. I have to do this because it's the only way to galactically move this political cluster F forward. But let me tell you what, you're nothing to me, and you should have had that conversation with the princess to help solidify and mend what was left with Chani, because Chani's over here just taking the brunt of Paul's change. And if Paul was cold, or as Seth said, this dark change in Paul, Chani took the brunt of it, and everything that Paul said in terms of I will love you no matter who I become or whatever, it becomes flat. It doesn't mean anything. And
well, it's even worse.
Backs it up.
He does kind of warn her, but it's
he does.
But it's a weird warning. It's sort of like, well, you have sympathy for me because I'm going to be a different person. And then he, I don't know. It just, And
he reiterates the same statement, but it didn't go far.
It was almost colder than it just happened.
Yeah. But yeah, we move the story rapidly from that point. Like after he takes the water of life, we are just into the final battle, basically. And this is kind of like, by this point in the movie, I was actually wondering if it was going to be a 3-parter, because I knew that the next part of the story took a long time to go through.
Yeah, and so they didn't want to go through the time jump. Is the thing with the director. Yep.
And
they wanted to avoid the time jump.
This is the changes they made to avoid the time jump were bad, in my opinion. I didn't like them, but so we avoid the original time jump, and we go kind of straight into the Battle of Arrakis. Almost, they re-meet Gurney Halleck, and in opposition to previous stories and previous tellings, this was a bad thing for Paul, because it reconnected him to his roots with an Atreides, and Halleck immediately doesn't fit in, and he's kind of cast as almost a villain character, who is only bent on revenge, and that's just Gurney's characters. He hates the Harkonnen.
Which is fair.
If you know Gurney Halleck's past, he wants revenge for a whole lot of stuff.
Well, in all fairness, the Harkonnen are brutal.
Yeah. So in the books and in the previous movies, Gurney and the Fremen get along like a house on fire because they hate the Harkonnen the same, and they're just gallivanting around, murdering Harkonnen, and having a great time together. He's not a confrontational figure with he was in this in the movie. But we go right into the Battle of Arrakis. The Emperor arrives on the planet, and I want to talk about that a little more later. And we go into the final battle where they use the atomics to blow up the shield wall. Fight. Paul and Fade have their final confrontation, where they really draw it out and make it look way more tense than it was in any previous story.
On that note, they drew out that fight, and the fight I really wanted to see drawn out was the fight between Rabban and Gurney, and that one was too short, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it, during the attack on to take back over, there's this big battle, and Gurney finally gets face to face with Rabban again to exact his revenge, and it was short and sweet, but again, it was short and sweet. There wasn't a lot of fighting going on there, and I would have liked to have seen more instead of Gurney practically coming up and owning him.
Yeah, the Gurney Rabban fight should have been the long, drawn out.
Right, yeah.
Really
that's what I thought was going to happen. Yeah.
And Paul's fight with Fade was always an exercise, a showing of his absolute power to the assembled Imperial court. Because in the I can't remember if it's in the book, but I know it's at least in 1 or 2 of the movies where he's just I can kill you with a word. And
he does. So in the first film, they have that. After he kills Fade, he uses the voice and just shatters his body.
Yeah.
And you don't get that in this, and I felt like that was a miss. They should have had this fight be shorter, to your point, Seth, because we know how powerful Paul is at this point. People don't seem to comprehend. Well, some do, obviously, but
he's not, though. So that from here on we proceed with the Emperor surrendering, Paul claiming Princess Irulan, and then another new thing is the assembled great houses of the Landsrod show up and basically say no to Paul, and that's when he says initiate the Holy War.
Yeah.
But so this is one of my big problems with the movie just overall, in that they weaken everyone. So if you remember the very first X-Men movie where we see Magneto for the first time, I was really disappointed that his powers were so lame in that first movie. Magneto didn't do any big stuff in that movie that he can do in the he was just kind of like an average powered mutant in the first movie.
Yeah.
And in Dune, they do that to almost everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Baron Harkonnen, the reason the Emperor shows up on Arrakis is because it's part of the Baron's plan.
Yeah.
The Baron let Raban screw over Arrakis because he was setting up Fade to be the savior.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a great he had a whole plan, and they just got rid of that, and it made him, and then at the end they make him this crawling, weak guy who just gets a knife in the neck, and that's it. Baron Harkonnen is, in my opinion, is one of the best villains in all of literature, because they don't go out and say it a lot, but all of these nobles, to some extent or another, have kind of a future sight through the spice. They're all people on the road to this Kwisatz Haderach.
Mm-hmm.
And they all think in these multi-stage plans out into the future. So they did a pretty good job where he was yeah, the Emperor helped us capture the planet, and boy, that's going to be inconvenient for him later because now we've got dirt on him. But that was just part of his plan in the books.
And they don't do that justice, and I don't know how much of it was they didn't want to turn this into, because again, this is to get that intricate into it, you need a series, and it's hard to do in a film, right? And so, at some point, you have to sacrifice. Is this about the Baron's plan, or is this about the Atreides? Is this and again, because they decided to skip time jumps in this, they can't stretch this out over the time frame that this actually plays out in
but the other films did do the time jump in one film in the 1984 version. But they kind of cut the Baron's influence down. They really diminished the Emperor, and at the end, the Kwisatz Haderach thing that didn't come into play. They kept building it up, and everyone's saying, okay, he's the Kwisatz Haderach, that we've never seen power like this before. And all we've seen of that is Paul getting mean, Paul taking control of the Fremen, and his the one plan. They did a very poor job of telling us why the Kwisatz Haderach is important.
And I feel like that was kind of weird because they spent a lot of time on the Bene Gesserit backstory and the manipulations they were doing between the bloodlines and everything, and how involved they were. That you're right, they didn't go back to the core reason of why they were doing what they were doing or the ramifications of it. And I don't know if that's still something that they plan to get to in the third film, which is kind of tossed up in the air, but they are working on. So, I mean, we'll see when they get to Dune Messiah.
And so, this it seems like all of this is in service to the message that they wanted in this second part, which was all focused on the religion and the coming holy war. They really refocused on that to the detriment, I feel, of many of the other parts of the story.
I think that's fair.
Aaliyah, they completely left. Aaliyah never got born in this story.
But they didn't leave her out 100%.
They
She was just
didn't,
introduced in a more creepy way.
But no, it wasn't even more creepy. Like, she would have been a much like, I was really looking.
Would they have, though, for a young child, though? Then they have to introduce that and deal with the trickiness of how do you get that to come across the screen really, really well. Granted, they seem to do it in the older films, but even then, it was very limited in what they were able to show with her versus what the depth of what they were going into with the characters in this new film. So,
well, like Baron Harkonnen was Aaliyah's kill.
Yeah,
like
I know that's a key thing that they changed. That wasn't Paul's kill in the end. It was
there's a whole big sequence that they left out because they skipped the time jump. We don't learn that Paul had children with Chani. We don't you wanted to know a moment where you could see a change in Paul if you wanted to visualize that. It's when he has to choose between his children and whatever he chose because he knew it from his visions that had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
His children had to die and he had to sacrifice them. And they cut that out, and that would have been a much better turn for Paul, in my opinion. That
darker and another. I mean, they'd have to go in a completely different. Yeah, it'd be a completely different film. And so it comes down to what did the director want to cover out of the arcs that are available within Dune.
I think he wanted to do I think the director kind of wanted to do much more of a colonialism story with Dune.
Around the Holy War, yeah.
And around the Holy War. He wanted to focus in on how the Bene Gesserit kind of tampered with this culture, and we see that in how the young Fremen differ from the older religious Fremen, and how Chani clearly realizes that the prophecies were planted to control her people. But it loses so much of the original, though, because in the original, her and Jessica were very, very close friends. And I
think that was a very much intentional departure in favor of which part of the story do we want to tell.
But you're changing. It's not the story then.
It isn't. It's an adaptation of it, but it is different. And
it's different, and it's still good, but
it's different, but it's good.
I don't, because in my mind, Paul is a hero, but he's a tragic hero. He in my reading of the books, the really important thing is that the Kwisatz Haderach can go to the place that neither the Guild Navigators nor the Bene Gesserit could. He was the one.
They don't even get into that.
They didn't even touch on that.
Guild Navigators don't even exist in this world practically.
Yeah, they completely wrote the Guild out of this one.
So that's what I mean is out of all the different layers there is to this, I don't think in 2 or 3 films they could have appropriately covered everything. And we know that there are story implications to having one thing and then not having the other, and they made the choice that this story is going to be based off of it, but it is going to be slightly different so they can get to this holy war. And I can respect that, but I do feel like it makes the part 2 a rug pull, right? Because part 1 gives no indication that this dial is going to be changed in part 2. It feels very much just like the first half of book 1.
And that is exactly kind of what I think, is that in that period between part 1 and part 2, they decided to change it, because in part 1, Paul had a really cool vision of the future where we see this Fremen in a different kind of set of battle armor just going through mowing down Sardaukar, and the faceplate opens up and it's Paul. So we see the Fremen kind of in a much more developed state.
Yeah.
in that, and that vision led me to expect that the second part of this would go the same, but we never see that. So I think
we never see that. And so in part 2, we get more visions that we ultimately never see. And I don't know that we're going to see it in the third film.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, but wasn't a lot of that he was seeing visions that weren't necessarily destined to come true?
Some of it was. The way they described it was Paul couldn't tell, he couldn't navigate that to understand it. And that's why he needed to drink the water of life. And because he resisted it, those visions were kind of driving him mad, because he that's why he resisted so much. He was like, look, all I know is if I go south, some of those start to become true. The piles of burning bodies and all this other stuff starts to become true. When he drinks the water, he sees all of the possibilities.
Because what was the Freeman that he ended up killing when he first joined the
Jamis?
Janus, right? And because he had seen visions where Janus was going to teach him the ways of the desert, right? And that ended up not coming true.
Like,
what's that?
I don't know. Like, I don't know how it works in this, but like in the book, the big lesson that Jamis taught Paul about the desert is that it's an unkind place and you're going to have to kill to survive. That was his lesson.
Oh.
And that's another scene they skipped, is where like Paul says, I was a friend of Jamis. And and so another thing they skipped is that like they changed the narrative for it to be much more like Paul and Jessica coming in and taking over the Fremen, whereas in the book and previous movies, it's much more an alliance between Paul and Jessica and the Fremen, because they basically give them the weirding way, or integrate what the Atreides know about fighting, who are already warriors who were making the Emperor afraid, and they train the Fremen in those ways, making them the incredible fighting force that they are. Like, Paul creates the Fadakin. He doesn't become a Fadakin.
Yeah.
The Fadakin are his personal warriors in the book. And they are the first that he trains, basically.
And again, I think for the timing purposes of what they wanted to get into, they changed it for better or for worse.
I know, but I feel like they definitely wanted to villainize Paul and Jessica in this much more than they were in the original text. And like, I get why, because I mean, Dune was written in a different time when we weren't thinking about like colonialism as much as we are. We weren't really thinking about like women's and men's roles as much as we are. Yeah. But I mean, Frank Herbert, for whatever like political failings for the time the book might have, according to us now, like he had some of the most empowered female characters in his fiction. Like, I read the Sword of Shannara, I think, and there's like no damn women in there at all. Meanwhile, in Dune, the Bene Gesserit are like a pillar of the galaxy's power. They're one of the three main powerhouses and can basically control politics from behind the scenes. And I don't feel like we needed to really demonize Jessica or what. Like, Jessica gets hers later on, no matter what, because she made bad choices. And in this, she just goes straight to, she goes through, like, the water of life. Like, after she takes the water of life, she goes through that same heel turn, where she was really a character you could relate to in the first movie and feel for. She instantly becomes a villain in this one.
Yeah.
And there's like no character progression along those lines of her like reaching that conclusion. And everyone's just like, oh, hey, let's listen to this fetus inside of her all of a sudden.
But did she really change that much? I didn't feel like in watching it that she changed all that much, because I mean, all along
I wouldn't describe it as a pivot, but more ambitious.
Yeah, right. I would agree with that.
Because
she always wanted Paul to ascend to that role, I think. Right?
Yeah,
and
but
so she just got more determined, I guess.
I don't
was my feeling.
That's how I felt. That's how I felt how it was with Jessica. Because even going up to taking the water of life, I think there was hesitancy there, and she lacked the confidence. And then after she took the water of life, she had the confidence, and then another being with inside her, obviously helping with that confidence.
And could that confidence be because now she can see the future as well?
She still can't. Like, this is why they should have got into it. This is why they should have got into what the Kwisatz Haderach is.
Yeah, and I don't know if all the things we should have gotten into, again, can you fit it in a 3-hour film?
So, and they should have, like, I told, like, through this, I was completely thinking that there should just be a third part. They should have just done a third part, so that they could have let.
And that's fair, and that would have allowed it that dial that turns into the direction that they're going to be extended a little bit. Doesn't feel so much as rug pull, or explaining more of why some of these things happen, or would have allowed a time jump to have played in there over a 3-part film. But they chose not to.
The big deal about, if I'm remembering this correct, the big deal about her becoming a Reverend Mother and drinking the water of life is because it basically unlocks her genetic memory. And so they say you can only tell the future by knowing the past. Well, with like thousands of generations of genetic memory, that gives you a whole lot of wisdom, and any glimpses that she gets of the future, she's got a lot more read on it now. So it's all kind of knowledge. And that does the same thing for Paul, but his future telling abilities are a lot more powerful. Like, the Kwisatz Haderach is the person who can be many places at once.
Yeah.
And in many timelines at once. So basically, it's that deal that Doctor Strange does in Endgame, or not Endgame, but Infinity War, where he visits like 14 million futures, and he's like, I find one that we make it through. So, like, that's the deal, is that Paul can do that, and he can go into this nexus of events that is the thing around Arrakis. Like, everything comes together at Arrakis, and the future of humanity is kind of defined there. And the Kwisatz Haderach is the one who can kind of work through that nexus, where the Bene Gesserit can't, the Guild Navigators can't, no one else.
And they touch that Paul now has it, but they don't express why that's important or sets that apart from the Bene Gesserits.
And why that's like, because everyone's talking about how powerful he is at the end of the movie, but none of that is clearly linked to him being some sort of super being. Like, in previous fights between him and Fade, he just annihilates Fade, which is what I thought they were going for with building Fade up as a fighter so much, so that he'd get to that final confrontation and just be annihilated by Paul, which would have like shown us, oh my god, he's the real deal. Like, in
Paul doesn't get his superhero moment effectively.
No.
And, like, he's supposed to be a god, and I don't see that. Like, they weakened everything.
So for me, I feel like I felt it, but they don't give it justice on screen 100% per se. The soundtrack seems to build and give you this feeling that Paul's now this powerful character, the way his demeanor changes and everything. But you're right, we don't see it in action quite so much, and kind of falls flat in that respect, maybe. So.
We do see some minor shows of power, like where he's convincing the Fremen
Yeah.
where he's just like telling them their history and they're falling on their knees. He's on a guide. But like they really played that up.
Yeah.
And like I didn't like it was a good movie. I liked it. I'm gonna see it again, but it's missing the heart of the book, I think. Because like in my read,
have the soul of the book.
In my read of the book, like Paul's a hero, but he's a tragic hero because like he knows that like when he says I found one path through it for us, I'm kind of like I always read that to mean like I found one path for society to survive and it's going to be bloody and awful.
Yes.
And I'm the one who has to make the call because no one else can see the way.
And they don't to your point, that they don't lay that out explicitly.
No.
That it's going to be a bloody
path.
I don't
even hint at it. Like,
yeah. I mean, if
like,
you know the book,
frame it as a selfish decision for Paul.
Yeah, you know it's going to be. You know, it's heading towards a dark time, and that billions of lives are on the line. And I guess they hint to it slightly, but they don't say that that's for sure a thing. Even after Paul drinks the water of life, he just knows that death is on the horizon.
Yeah. See, I always like Paul, in my mind, made the decisions that he did, knowing what it would cost him.
Yeah.
Like he knew, like after he drank the water of life, he knew that he was going to lose his kids. He knew that he now knew that the holy war was unavoidable, but it was still the only way.
Yeah.
Like he knew he was going to basically become a god, and it wasn't going to be bloodless for anyone. But he also fully keeps his promise to the Fremen, because he is a Fremen in the books. Like that's something that I feel like they're ignoring is that, and I'll have to see if they make Dune Messiah, is that he does begin transforming Arrakis.
Yeah.
Like he is like in my read of the books and the original movies, he's as much Fremen as he is Atreides at the end.
Yes.
Like he is a person of two worlds.
Yeah.
And in this, it portrays him very much as a person of only one world at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always, in my mind, he was always both Fremen and he was Atreides, who he grew up with, but that family was dead and he became Fremen. Like that was always my read, and this movie's kind of disappointing me there.
Fair enough.
If you could save the future by becoming a leader of a holy war, would you do it?
Well, I mean, you said it right there. If you could save the future, like if I've got perfect sight of the future, and I know the only way, like it's either everyone dies or multiple billions of people die. Like you have to choose, like if you've got to become the villain to save everyone or like the majority when everyone would die, then you have you have to make that hard choice like Paul did. Like I mean maybe I misread the book.
You would?
I would.
Yeah.
Like
Charles?
Oh God, not if I had to put up with all that prophecy crap.
Charles is just like, nah, everyone can die. That's too much trouble.
Let the universe
care about you people enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That'd be a tough one. Especially, if you could see. So I'm assuming he can see the future beyond his own life.
But he's still God. So it's still not, I don't think I'd buy into, because so he's a god, but not really, because there's still just the one decision to make. He's still a prisoner.
Well, so
he's not a free god.
Well, right. That's kind of where Dune Messiah and Children of Dune come in, is I think they reveal that he wasn't the real, completed Kwisatz Haderach. He was just most of the way there. And his son Leto actually is the Kwisatz Haderach, and he becomes a full-on god. and he becomes the God Emperor.
Nice.
But yeah, so also like one character change that I didn't like was Countess Fenring. Do you remember her, Chris? She was the Bene Gesserit who went and banged
Oh,
Faye.
yeah.
So this I didn't agree with because like it kind of cheapens the character of Count Fenring from the original one. Like I don't mind the gender shift. What I mind is that they took Countess Fenring away from basically being the Emperor's spy master and like chief political advisor who had they were basically a Littlefinger type character who had knew where all the bodies were buried and was the main schemer in the Imperial Court. And they kind of did that character short shrift. I don't know why.
Well, again, I think it pulls those. How many threads can you have before you start to lose your? So this is what I would lean back on, and we can wrap it up with this. You know, where these Dune films are going is not going to do the books any kind of real justice for how deep the storyline does get, and it's not going to do every character justice, in my opinion. It's falling on solidifying some stories around some key characters, sacrificing some timelines and some backgrounds, and to get to this holy war. And I think it leaves a lot up in the air because the second film has changed enough to where it leaves a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where to go with it, and we don't have anything to fall back on that helps us understand where we're going to end up if they make that third film. Whereas, you know, part one never let us know that we were going to get that rug pull. And that was a little bit of a disservice. And I think more publicity around what they wanted out of this 2-3 movie story arc would have helped going into it. So I felt like I had a better understanding, because after I watched Dune Part 2, I was like, wow, what an amazing film. Also, what the hell did they just do? Right. But when I went back and started reading more on the interviews with the director, it was like, oh, this is about how do we get to Dune Messiah and flip the script on people viewing Paul as a hero. And to your point, Seth, a tragedy is more of what the storyline is supposed to be in a holy war. And you know, there's so many threads they could have pulled on, but there was just no way to cover it all. And so that was a sacrifice, for better or for worse, that made this film a masterpiece for displaying what the world of Dune is, but also a tragedy in and of itself in what they couldn't cover and what they decided to admit that ultimately changed some of the major key story arcs. And maybe you know, I felt there was one or two opportunities to redeem itself a little bit. One being the speech we talked about that Paul gives to the Emperor's daughter about where she realistically sits in that relationship. And you know, the other was getting some clearer glimpses of maybe what the future holds, or, you know, if they wanted to preview what Dune Messiah was to bring, since Paul's future visions are clearer now, we could have gotten a mini teaser trailer in the glimpse of his visions to help us understand maybe what we were looking forward to. I think there are two opportunities that would have helped buoy a little bit what our expectations are going into maybe a possible third film, and help close that up. But they didn't do that. And I feel like there should have been an extended edition or maybe a director's cut that adds those scenes that helps fix that. But here we are. So,
all right,
it's a 10 out of 10 film for me for the visual prowess, the soundtrack, and all that kind of stuff. It's a 6 out of 10 for the heart of Dune, of what the first book was. But again, if they make that third film, I'm going to reserve total judgment to see what the ultimate trilogy ends up being. So,
yeah, and if I do have to say like something, like go see it in the theater. because the bigger, this is the first movie where I felt like the big speakers actually added something.
Holy shit! Right?
Like the vibration in this movie is very important.
They wanted you to feel like everything in this, and that's why I thought like it was a masterpiece.
Sandworm coming.
Yes.
Linda and I saw it in IMAX, and it was really powerful in IMAX. There was a video, I think I posted it on our Discord chat, about a comparison between the regular theater and the IMAX version, and what more you can see. And it was really interesting, because I didn't realize it as I'm seeing it in IMAX. I'm just thinking, yeah, it's a bigger picture, I'll get more detail and stuff. But you don't realize how much of the top and the bottom of the screen that you're missing from the regular theater conveys so much additional information, like the height of the ornithopters, how far they are above the sand, or when that sandworm is crashing through the sand dunes. In the theater, you see the sand shoot up in the air, but what you don't see is the ripples of the sand on the ground coming all the way towards you in the theater. And it just conveys such a sense of a massive organism moving through the sand, even before you see the worm. It was
that big.
What's that?
Not that big.
You're right.
Yeah.
Don't show off, man. Nothing too big. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Although, like, that's another character that got short shrift, is Stilgar.
Again.
Yeah.
Again.
They just like made him a one-note religious fanatic.
Everybody has something cut. Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us know if you've seen Dune. Let us know what you think in the comments section down below. And if you haven't, we hope you get out there and check it out, and then come back and let us know what you think. And on that note, we will wrap it up for today, and we will see you all next time. Have a great week, and keep watching the sci-fi out there. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.